على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. Can we make this brighter? Okay.
Somehow.
Is that better?
That's good right there.
All right. Okay, if you can't see the screen, move so that you can see the screen. Before we get started, very quickly, this will be probably a little bit different than you normally used to for like a special presentation. I'm going to be moving fast, and there's going to be a lot of slides. So I would highly recommend that you turn your phone off or at least put it away. Not because it's going to be incredibly amazing, but as a challenge to yourself, and this will become clear as we go on, to see if you can actually just sit and focus on one thing for an hour. That'll be the challenge. Alright? So try to turn your phone off, put it away, and we'll get started, inshallah. So before we get started, how many people were born after 1985? Raise your hands. Meaning you're millennials or whatever it is that everyone calls you now. Okay? How many people are born before 1985 when you're kind of like mid-30s or older? Stand up for a second. We just need the exercise, so you can sit back down. The reason that this particular year is important, the reason that 1985 is an important year, is because this is a dividing line for humanity. People born before 1985 are the last generation of mankind, and I'm not exaggerating, it's not hyperbole. We are the last generation of mankind to meaningfully experience adult life before the advent of smartphones and social technology.
Takbir. Allah.
Those born after 1985, this is something that's more natural for them. So those of us that are a little bit older, we remember doing things like playing outside when we were kids. We would go out in the street, we would play with a ball, we would make up games. We would just do kind of whatever. If we were out and about, we were driving around, we needed directions somewhere. We didn't have a GPS. So we would go to a gas station. We would walk inside. We would make conversation with the cashier. And we would ask them how to get to the highway or the street that we were looking for. And then we would go about our way. If we needed to stop and call somebody, we would go and use a payphone. On the way back from school trips in high school, our bus would stop off at a gas station. And we would go and put in a quarter. Or if you're Desi, you would call, collect, and then just hang up before they answered, right? And then your parents would come and pick you up from school. But kids now, they're growing up in a completely different world. They're growing up with completely different set of circumstances, different experiences, a completely different situation. And a lot of things, a lot of big things have changed, but also a lot of little things have changed. So there's a lot of small things that we grew up accepting to be true might no longer be true. A lot of things that we maybe took for granted are no longer the case. When technological change happens, a lot of things get changed sometimes without us realizing it. Growing up, if I wanted to play video games with a friend, there was a process. So if I wanted to play Mario Kart with Brandon from school, there was a process. My parents would have to come and say, okay, who's Brandon? We need to meet him. Can we see his report card? What kind of grades does he make? What do his parents do for a living? Where do they live? How many siblings does he have? It's like a more rigorous process than marriage almost. Like once they check all the boxes, like, okay, now you guys can play video games together. There wasn't online gaming, there wasn't online multiplayer stuff. It was, you went through that process and you got to play with somebody. If we wanted to watch movies, we would go to a video store where they had these cassettes and you would select from one of the videos that they had available, and not all of them would be available. And on very special occasions, you might get two, but that was very rare. There was no such thing as binge watching. There was no such thing as just watching whatever you wanted, whenever you wanted on demand. You physically went to a store, you got what you wanted, and then you came back. So there's a lot of little things that have changed. But people that are growing up now, they don't really see that. This is the age of digital natives. This is pictures of my kids right there. They've grown up in an age where screens are just a way of life. My own kids, when they were younger, they would be able to navigate YouTube before they could actually put 2 or 3 words together. They would know how to go in, find a video, go to the related videos, know what to put on, even though they can't say, I want to watch Lightning McQueen, but if you give them a phone, they could find Lightning McQueen. Right? That's kind of how they grow up now. And so those of us that are a little bit older, we kind of freak out. We're like, okay, these kids are really weird. We don't really understand how they think, how they operate, what goes through their mind, what motivates them. We understand that they're kind of creative and different, but we just don't get it. There's a disconnect. We don't understand what they're doing. And all the little things, we see them, and we're like, something's off, but I can't put my finger on it. Right? The way that things were a little bit simpler, now things are a little bit more complicated, we just don't quite get it. And we sometimes will see things like this, and it's scary. Because anytime a big change happens, it instills some sense of fear. And we look at that, we're like, wow, if that's what the future looks like, I'm kind of freaked out. Sometimes it's justified, like if you're playing a bowling video game at a bowling alley, right? Sometimes it's like, okay, no, I think I'm right on this one. But also the more things change, the more they stay the same. One of the things that does, even as much as the technology and the means and all of the mediums change, human psychology is still the same. Human needs are still the same. The things that we struggle with at a human level are still the same. But one thing that is different in our time versus any other time, is the level of connection that we have. See, this for the first time in human history, we live in an age where we can have an abundance of relationships and connections, even with people that we've never met before. And so, the question then really becomes, well, how do we respond? Is it that the way things were better, and the way that things are coming are going to be worse? No, that's always been the case with every generation. When I was growing up, my parents were freaked out that the TV was going to make us dumb. You know, before them, you go rewind a few decades, and people were worried that the printing press was going to make their kids dumb because now they don't have to memorize as much stuff. With every major change, those types of fears are always there. But the real question is how do we adapt? See, if we say that Islam is the true guidance until the end of time for all of mankind, well then that necessitates that our tradition, our religion, gives us guidance on how to lead from the front. Not to be coming from behind. See, if this program was held 7 years ago, all the discussion would be like, is Facebook halal, is Facebook haram? Is Facebook halal, and I know people don't like hearing this, but the answer is it doesn't really matter. Because people are using it anyway. Is Snapchat halal or haram? The answer is, people are using it, so let's figure out how to deal with it. That's the theological discussion is different, but let's figure out how to deal with it. And more importantly, the challenges that people are facing, we have something to offer. And that's what we're hoping to explore today, inshallah. So the first thing to note is that social media is a tool. Technology is a tool. All of it comes down to how you use it. That's all that it is. It can overrun your life. It can be a great means of productivity and benefit. It's just like a computer. It's just like a typewriter. It's just like a hammer, a knife. It's like any other tool. It all comes down to how you use it. The key, though, is intentionality. You have to be intentional about how you're utilizing the tool that you have. So throughout this talk, we're going to be sharing a few principles from the Prophet ﷺ. Very basic ahadith, principles that our religion has given us that teach us how to lead from the front on this discussion. The Prophet ﷺ told us that the example of good company and bad company is like that of the musk seller and the blacksmith. The example of the musk seller we understand. If you go to a store that sells perfume or cologne, when you walk in, it smells nice. You go and they might give you a free sample, so you put it on and now you smell nice. Maybe they give you a little tester bottle. Maybe they have a sale, so you buy some perfume and then you walk out and you leave. But just by virtue of walking in the store and it's smelling nice and you're trying something on, you leave a little bit more uplifted than when you came in, right? That environment was nice. You smelled something nice, you felt a little bit better. When you go to the blacksmith, how many people have ever been to a blacksmith? Okay, very few. It's not one of the things that we normally go to dinner and we meet a blacksmith, this doctor, lawyer, engineer, but in general, think about if you go to the mechanic. Right? What happens when you go to the mechanic? You go, you get out of your car, it smells bad. There's, fumes, there's oil, there's all these kind of things. You're filling out your paperwork to get your oil changed, You touch something on the wall, now your clothes are dirty. You go sit in the waiting room, the chairs are dirty and dusty. The coffee is old and stale. The TV's got some random program that you hate on. And you're just waiting to get out of there. And by the time you leave, just the smell, and this was dirty, and that was weird, and I got grease on me, and this and that, you just feel icky. Like, I gotta go home and take a shower. And so just by virtue of being in that environment, you're not uplifted, but you feel bad afterward. And so we understand that. We understand this analogy when it comes to the company that we keep. But the dots that we don't connect are the company that we keep online. Our feed is our company. So everyone that I follow on Instagram is the company that I keep. The pictures that they post, the things that they put, where they check in. All of those things that I see, that's the company that I keep. The people I follow on Twitter or on Snapchat or on Facebook. All of those things that I'm checking dozens and dozens of times a day, even if they're people I've never met, they're people I've never spoken to. Maybe they don't even know who I am, I just happen to follow them. But what they post ends up being the company that I keep. And I have to understand that that is going to have an effect on me one way or another. And so we have to connect those dots. And this is why the Prophet ﷺ said that a person is on the religion of their friend. And what we learn from this is something else. Although it's a very simple and easy to understand advice, we learn something very profound. Which is who you hang out with and who you associate with has an impact on you subconsciously, whether you want to admit it or not. And so that's why you'll see people saying things like, your true friends you can count on one hand. Your true friends are the people that have been with you from, through thick and thin. And so the nature of friendship has changed online because we're connected to so many people. See, normally with friends, friendships are cultivated over a long period of time. People go through ups and downs. Think about your kids. If your kids have a fight with a friend, what do? We teach them how to repair the relationship. We teach them how to address that conflict, how to talk to one another, how to apologize, how to get past what happened. Because that's what true friendship is, you go through those ups and downs. But what happens now is that we're connected to 500 people, so if someone says something to me that I don't like, well, guess what? I have 499 other people I can be friends with. I have no incentive to repair that relationship. And so those relationships become more and more superficial. And it doesn't take a lot for us to understand how that affects marital dynamics as well. Right? The amount of people you can talk to and where you can seek escape. But with these relationships come expectations. And so if I want to be friends with these people, I have to take part in the conversation. And so I also now have to like the things that they post. I have to make sure that I'm watching their Instagram story. I have to make sure that I'm commenting when they post a selfie. I have to make sure that I'm doing all of these things to be engaged, because that's how I show that I'm active in this relationship with my friends. And so naturally we become more and more addicted to our phones, because that's where the conversation is happening. Whereas before it may have been elsewhere. Whereas before it may have been that you met your friends a couple of times a week at the gym. Or you went out to the mall on the weekend, or you went to go see a movie together. Or you went out to eat together. Or any number of other things. But now those conversations that used to happen at the theater, or at the restaurant, or at the mall, or at the gym, are predominantly happening on the phone. And so we become more and more engaged with those devices, because now we have to keep up. And so the more that we do that, again, there's trade-offs. There's trade-offs. And it's not my point here to say that these trade-offs are good or these trade-offs are bad, but it's intentionality. You have to be aware of what the trade-off is. I have to be aware of when I get access to somebody by being on my phone a lot, what is that time trading off with? That's something that I have to be aware of. I have to be intentional about what's being sacrificed in order for that to happen. But also it creates other dynamics, other social dynamics. How we interact in crowds, how we interact with other people. We now tend to shy away and just go back and almost seek refuge in that device where we're familiar and not talk to others, not socialize with others, not meet with others. It used to be that weddings, you would go and you have to sit at a table, it's like, okay, I have to force myself to converse with this person and meet that person. But now you sit, if you don't know anybody, no big deal, everyone just goes on their phone, right? Again, not good or bad in and of itself, but we have to be aware of what trade-offs we're making and why. We have to be intentional about them. But we learn from the life of the Prophet ﷺ even the etiquettes of these types of interactions. The companions observed about him that when he spoke to someone, he turned his body to them completely. So if someone came to speak to him, he didn't do the 1 second, hold on, this and that, right? But he would actually turn and give them attention. Think about the interactions that we have where someone is coming to get our attention and we say, 1 second, right? Think about how many times we do that, and yet we find, again, something very simplistic, basic conversation, and yet we find within our religion that we're taught that there's a certain etiquette for these types of interactions. There's a certain adab and a certain way of interacting that a Muslim is supposed to have. And so, again, this may seem extremely simple, but these teachings are very profound. You talk to someone who manages HR in a major company and ask them, what is the cost of people not being fully present, not being fully engaged? There's a major cost to these types of things, and people are trying to figure out how do we mitigate that. The Prophet ﷺ also told us something very interesting. He said, when there are 3 people together, 2 of them should not have a private conversation. So if there's 3 people together, and only 2 of them know how to speak Urdu and the third one doesn't, those 2 should not have a conversation in Urdu because the third person will think that they're talking about me. Right? It's natural. That's a very basic, again, basic teaching from the Prophet ﷺ that we understand. Now think about when we're in a group setting, we ever text somebody else about someone that's sitting right there with us? Right? We think about that. The dynamic of the medium of communication has changed, but yet we're still taught not to act in that way. And so even these types of interactions, when we go back and look at our tradition, we find that there's a very profound level of guidance. And these aren't things that are very complex. They're not very complicated. In fact, all of the hadith that we're going to go over tonight, they're things that we teach 5-year-olds in Sunday school. They're the basics. But those basics have profound implications when we sit and think about it. But with that phone comes more consequences. A friend of mine who's an imam, he put this sign up in their masjid. And he said that the sign has never seen double digits. He said because basically, no matter how well you do on Friday, it's over. At Jummah, it's just, you can't stop it. He said, but one time on Friday, they made it through the entire Jummah without anyone's phone going off. So it hit 7. Or 8, or whatever. And he goes, I legitimately got excited. Like I was going to take a picture of it and post it on Facebook and the whole bit. And he's like, you wouldn't believe it. Saturday morning at Fajr time, someone's phone went off. Right? It's like, no matter what you do, it's very difficult to kind of get rid of that type of thing. But it's a part and parcel of our society today. This one doesn't really need any commentary or explanation. Oftentimes we can't go without using it. We can't eat without taking a picture first in the right lighting and the right angle and all those different things to show everyone where we're eating and what we're eating. And our natural inclination now in different situations has changed to documenting instead of helping. And so when we see something happening, instead of going to see, is everyone okay? Does anybody need any help? Our reaction is, well, let's take out our phone and film this. Right? We want to be the first ones to post it online. And so we developed this almost addiction with our technology. Have you ever left the house without your phone but you still feel it vibrate? Right? That's problematic. That's a problem. That's indicative of kind of how far we've come with that. How many people work in a corporate setting? Right? Like you work at a cubicle at a computer. Okay? If you do, sorry, skip one slide here. You'll know that your day is overrun with these interactions with all your different devices. All the different things that you have going on throughout the day. And so when you go and sit down at work, your day very much looks like this. You get to work, you go sit down at your desk, you unpack your stuff, you take out your phone, you check your email, you check Facebook, you check Instagram, you check Twitter, check Facebook, check ESPN, CNN, Reddit, you do all those things. Then you check your work email, check your work calendar. Then you get up, you go down to the cafeteria, you get some breakfast. On the way back, maybe you talk to your coworker for 5 minutes. Now you go back to your desk. It's been a solid 10, 15 minutes since you got up. I mean, you don't know what could have happened in the world, so you got to check all these things again. And then the day just kind of goes like that. And then we get home, and your spouse asks you, how's the day? We're like, oh, it's really busy. Oh, are you working on a major project? Like, I have no idea, but I was really busy. I don't know what I did, I don't know what I accomplished, but I'm exhausted. I'm exhausted. I've been busy, I don't know doing what, but I need to now veg out. I need to veg out. And the way that I veg out is that I'm going to get home from work after doing all of this, and because I'm so tired, because I've been working hard all day, I'm going to lie down on the couch, I'm going to put the game on the television, and I'm going to take out my phone and check my WhatsApp groups and Twitter all night. And then I'm going to go to bed. And so that cycle kind of just continues. And it's to the point where even things like going to sleep and waking up become difficult. Because here's what happens when we go to bed. You lie down and you start checking all these things, and then you start watching Netflix, you start watching YouTube videos, and you're lying down in bed, you've got your phone, you're just watching. Here's what happens. After a little while, your eyes close and the phone drops on your chest. You're like, oh, all right. You pick it up, 6 minutes left in this video, I can knock it out, right? 3 minutes left, it falls down again. And you realize that you're just about to pass out. So you quickly plug it into the charger, turn your head and fall asleep. And the reason that we do this is because at some level we're afraid of just lying down with nothing to do. We're afraid of just lying there and being alone with our own thoughts. And if we think about how are we supposed to go to sleep, right? There's different sunnahs of what you recite when you go to bed. Different du'as, ayatul kursi, so on and so forth. But a lot of times we might not do it. And I'll say it's not that we don't care, that we're not motivated to, but the reality is that because we put such a mental strain on ourselves all day long, that by the time we lie down and we're like, oh, I should recite ayatul kursi, we're too mentally exhausted to do it. We're like so drained that we can't even do that, much less waking up. When you wake up, there's du'as for waking up. It's, time to pray Fajr, this and that. But we wake up, and it's, who viewed my Instagram story last night? Who liked the photo that I posted? Let me check my emails. Oh, 2 minutes left to Fajr, let me jump out of bed, right? That becomes our morning routine. And so from the moment we wake up until the moment we go to bed, we're just on this treadmill. And like I said, there's trade-offs. One of the trade-offs, or for me, the biggest trade-off, is that we lose that time for reflection. We're told so often in the Quran, reflect. Reflect on the creation of Allah. Like, oh, look at the clouds, look at the sun, look at the waterfalls, right? But what do? The sun is setting, take a picture, put a filter on it, put it on Instagram. Like, okay, I reflected on creation. How many likes did I get, right? But we're told to sit and reflect. And part of that process is, if you think about it, is making dua. Dua is a person sitting with literally no other focus other than their conversation with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But that conversation, that dua, it requires downtime. It requires white space. It requires the ability to sit for a period of time, whether it's 1 minute or 10 minutes, and do nothing but focus on making dua. But that's very difficult. How many people have been to Hajj within the last few years? Right? Hajj is, the essence of Hajj is which day? Arafah, right? What do you do between Dhuhr and Maghrib on the day of Arafah? You make dua. But if you go, how many people are actually making dua from Dhuhr to Maghrib? Not the majority, the minority. The majority aren't able, they don't have the stamina. And it's weird to say stamina for someone making dua. They don't have the mental capacity to actually just sit and make dua for 6 or 7 hours. Because we haven't trained ourselves to do it. We're so used to being distracted that to sit and be focused for 30 or 45 minutes or 1 hour or 2 hours or 6 hours becomes a monumental task. It becomes very difficult. And so there's a very direct trade-off with our personal spirituality. There's a comedian talking about why people text and drive. He said, why would someone willingly, voluntarily get into a car and say, I'm going to put my life and the lives of those around me at danger so I can message somebody? Like, why would someone do that? And he said it's because people are afraid of being alone with their own thoughts. They're so afraid of sitting there with nothing to do, nothing to think about, that they would rather take out their phone and say hi to somebody and risk getting into a wreck than to sit there and do nothing. And so this idea of even just sitting and doing nothing almost becomes a skill that we have to learn, as strange as that sounds. But these are, again, the trade-offs that we make. So social media is a tool. Every tool has trade-offs. But social media is also a magnifying lens. So when we think about the challenges that humans face, envy, jealousy, desires, this, that, backbiting, gossip, just all the different things that people can do or have done. They've always existed, right? They've always existed. But what's different about social media is that it puts a magnifying lens to what is there. And so it amplifies those emotions. It amplifies those issues. We've all heard the Surah Al-Hakum Takathur, right? That people are going to compete with each other over their worldly gains. Now normally we mean this to understand wealth, because the currency of the dunya is wealth. What kind of house, what kind of car, how many kids, what kind of job, status. Right? That's the dunya currency. So if I wrong someone, if I violate someone's rights, how do they exact justice? They can take me to court and sue me for money. Because money is the way that equity and justice is done in this life. Now in the hereafter, we know from the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ asked the companions, like, who's the bankrupt person on the Day of Judgment? And he explained that it was the person who came with a mountain of good deeds, but he violated the rights of other people. And so the person that he gossiped about or slandered, he will have to give up his good deeds to them or take some bad deeds from them. Because in the hereafter, there's no money. The currency of the hereafter is your deeds. On social media, currency is attention. On social media, currency is attention. What's the watch time? What's the watch time? How many minutes have people been watching my videos? How many hours? How many views? How many hits? How many clicks? How many retweets? How many likes? How many comments? Attention is what people are fighting over on social media. So it's important to understand that when people are focused on this world, they will do whatever it takes to attain success financially, because that's what they're incentivized to do. A person who's focused on the akhirah will do whatever it takes to attain good deeds, because they are incentivizing themselves to earn as much reward as possible. But someone who's trying to succeed on social media, they are incentivized to do the things that will get them the most amount of attention. And so that's very important to understand. And so when we understand, when we realize that, we start to see how things play out and why they play out the way that they do. The Prophet ﷺ told us that if you have no shame, do as you wish. If you have no shame, do as you wish. Now you think about what are the types of things that get attention. And they'll often be things that are lewd or immoral or unethical. And so people make entire careers out of doing something shameless and then turning it into a mega empire where they become A-list celebrities and have a clothing line and a reality TV show and their own perfume and millions of people waiting to take selfies with them. And yes, I'm passively aggressively talking about the Kardashians. Right? We're the generation that made them famous. But if you look at it, that becomes a success model. That becomes a success model. That if this is how we define success, and that's what someone has to do to get famous in order to get all of these things, then we're teaching people that this is the playbook. This is what you have to follow if you want to do it too. And so that's something that we have to be very cognizant of. Now when that's the case, it starts to affect the way that we behave, the way that we interact. And the Prophet ﷺ told us, all of my followers are forgiven except those who publicize their sins. Except those who publicize their sins. See, people have always committed sins. Right? People have always drank or gone places they weren't supposed to go, or done this or done that. But traditionally there's some element of hiding it, of keeping it under wraps, of not just publicizing it to everybody. But now we will do those same things that people have maybe traditionally done, but then we go post it online. And we wait for people to like it and click on it and engage with it. And the Prophet ﷺ told us that the reason that those who publicize their sins aren't forgiven is because it's like they did something wrong and they went to bed and nobody knew what they did. No one had any idea. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala covered it up. One of Allah's beautiful names is As-Sittir. As-Sittir is the one who loves to cover the sins of His servant. Allah loves to cover up the wrongdoing, to cover up the mistake. For everyone not to find out about it. But this person wakes up in the morning, they take this cover that Allah put on it, they cast it aside and they stand up and they announce to people, look what I did. Look what I've done. And that's exactly what we do when we post a picture. When we check in somewhere that we're not supposed to. And so that is something that, again, we find that our religion gives us that guidance, but this is something that's very major. And someone might say, well, okay, I might not publicize my sins, right? I might not do these shameless things to get attention. But let me tell you what this other person did. Let me send you a screenshot of this conversation. Look what that person posted on their Instagram. And even for that, we're taught in our religion that whoever conceals the faults of others, Allah will conceal their faults on the day of resurrection. So it's not enough that I don't share my misdeeds, but when I see other people posting that, I don't partake in sharing it and spreading it. I don't partake in publicizing what other people have done as well. Because that is also just as immoral. That is also just as bad. But now when you see this dynamic, that people are acting a certain way online, they're posting certain types of things online, it starts to have consequences. Right? These things don't happen in a vacuum. They start to affect other aspects of life. It starts to impact marriage. It starts to impact how people find a spouse. You know, I remember being the point of contact for a relative, and people were sending me those nice little bio data sheets, or this, you know, here's the photo, this person is this tall, and this is their degree, and blah, 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 and these are languages they speak. First thing I would do is go and Google them, or look them up on Facebook, and you start finding pictures of things that you're like, yeah, I don't think that my sister should marry this person, right? And people get disqualified in that process because of things that they posted online, not even realizing that's what's happening. And that person runs off like, man, it's so hard to get married, you know, people aren't accepting of who you are, and I'm being my authentic self, and this and that. But it's like, you don't understand what you're posting, the ramifications of it, right? These things have impacts on these major life events. And so even the process of finding someone, of how we interact, how we talk to other people, all those dynamics have changed. The mediums have changed. But it's also not just that, you know, the courtship process, but even the marriage itself. I was talking to my barber, and he was telling me, he goes, you know, my wife runs her own business, she's a wedding planner, but the thing is that we can't even watch a movie without her being on her phone. And it's very distracting. Because it's her business, it's her livelihood, it puts food on the table, but at the same time I feel like we're not connecting. And you know, even this program, I've done it a couple of times, and people have told me like there's so many instances of people that are living in the same house, but they're living completely different lives. So like the husband comes home from work, doesn't talk to the kids, doesn't talk to his wife, but he's on WhatsApp all night. Right? Just engrossed in these groups and with their friends and the chats and this and that. And those things start to very heavily impact family dynamics. the way that we talk to one another, the way that we interact with one another. All these dynamics in the home change. And so we have to have a way, we need to understand that yes, it's not that we're going to just eliminate the technology out of our house, but we have to understand how we're going to utilize it. What are going to be our ground rules? What are we not willing to compromise on? So it's not just that you take it out, but you find a way that works. You find a way that is best to manage it within your own home. Now it's, of course, family also includes our children. And so the way that we raise our children, the way that we view our children, all of these dynamics have changed drastically as well. And so we see our kids and we see the way that they're doing things, we're like, man, I don't know. Can you guys read that? So it says, who was the first president? And they wrote Getty Images because that was what was written under the photo, stock photo. But we worry about our kids. We worry about how they're going to process all of these things. You know, what's going to be the effect on them when they become adults? You know, people that are 4 years old, 5 years old, 10 years old, 15. How is all of this going to affect them when they're 25 or 35 or 45? It's a very real concern. And there's not an easy way of forecasting that. But parents have to be engaged with their children where they are. You have to go to where the conversation's happening. And that might be kind of awkward. Like I remember the very first time I ever got a text message like from my mom or my dad, and I was like, whoa, I'm not used to talking to them in this way, right? Like my mom never knew how to turn on a computer. All of a sudden, like last year, she gets like a Facebook account. And she starts sending me like text messages with emojis in them, and I'm like, I don't think you're using that emoji right. Like it becomes really awkward, right? But you know, those methods, it just becomes weird. It's in a way that we're not used to doing things, but we sometimes have to do it. And for children, the important thing to understand is that parents want to be involved. They want to be a part of whatever's happening. I remember I sent my sister a picture of one of our kids on Snapchat, and she was saying, oh, that was a cute picture, blah, blah, and my mom goes, wait, what picture? And I go, oh, it's a picture of this, and she goes, I didn't see it. Did you put it on Facebook? I'm like, no, I don't use Facebook anymore. She's like, where did you put it? I'm like, oh, it was on Snapchat. She's like, oh, what's that? Can you put it on my phone? I was like, no. We're not having this conversation, right? But parents want to be involved in what's happening. They want to be part of what's going on. And so, for children, and look, and one very small, like microcosm of an example, but it explains it, right? We know the value that Islam puts on respecting our parents. But think about when your mom comes to you, or your dad comes to you. Hey son, or my daughter, like, can you do this? Yeah, 1 second. Right? It might not overtly be disrespectful. It might be accepted as a way of behaving. But we need to hold ourselves to a higher standard as well. There's an understanding that if my parents come to me, my phone should not take priority. I need to put the priority where it belongs. Now that goes both ways. It goes both ways. The parents are sometimes more guilty of this than the children. Parents sometimes are much more guilty of this than their kids. If you think about a kid who is 8 years old or 9 years old, and every time they're like, hey dad, look at this, look at this. Oh yeah, that's nice, cute, okay. Hey dad, look at this, oh look at my too. Alright, yeah, go ask your mom. Right? Those interactions seem harmless. They seem harmless. Because in the moment I might be doing something really important. I might have a crisis at work, I might have a funny video to watch, like there could be all kinds of different things going on at that moment in time. And it seems innocuous, I'm saying, yeah, 1 second. But here's the thing. When your son or your daughter turns 16, 17, 18, 19, and for the last 10 years, every time they come to their parents for attention, their parents make them feel second priority, we understand the ramifications. We understand where people will go to get attention. Those types of situations don't happen overnight. They're the result of these interactions compounding multiple times, over years. They say, oh, my parents don't pay attention to me. You're like, what do you mean I don't pay attention to you? Of course I pay attention to you, but in their mind they see, I'm second priority every single time. I'm third priority every single time. And so these small interactions, they seem harmless, they seem innocuous, but they have very deep consequences down the road. So the question comes up, well, okay, so how do we manage all of this technology in the house? And the answer is I don't have an answer. But what I can tell you, what I would suggest, is that you use tonight as an excuse to go home and essentially have a family meeting. And say, look, we went to this program at the masjid and they said that when we get home we should make a decision on how we're going to utilize the devices in our home. And whatever that looks like for you is fine. You figure that out, but then the hard part is sticking with it. Some people might say that my kids are never going to touch a screen until they turn 18 because I think iPads are the same thing as doing heroin. Okay, that's fine. You can make that decision and you can keep them off that screen until they turn 18, but you better stick with it and you better have a good reason. And you better be able to manage that correctly in your home. Someone else might say, well, they can use it after they do their homework or after they do their chores. Or they can use it on the weekends but not during the school week. Or after 8 p.m. we take all the devices in the home and put them in a bin. And adults and kids alike aren't able to use it. Whatever that looks like. And there's never going to be a one-size-fits-all solution. Each family is different. Each family is different. Everyone's situations are different. But the important thing is that you have an intentional plan, that this is how we are going to manage it in our home. And then you stick with it. And if I can make one suggestion, it would be that at the very least, family dinner time is screen-free. At the very least. If you want to leave everything else as is, fine, but at the least, keep family dinner screen-free. And you'll start to notice the impact of that. Now the thing is, the technology is always moving fast. And so we learn one thing and all of a sudden we got to switch. We got to learn something else. We have to adapt. And things are always going to be different and your kids are always going to be ahead. They're always going to be one step ahead of the parents. But the important thing is making the effort and trying to engage. And the more effort there is, the more that things work out at the end, inshallah. The Prophet ﷺ also told us that from the excellence of a person's Islam is that they leave what does not concern them. Now, again, very obvious Sunday school level teaching. We all get it. But the execution is difficult. Because every time we get online, we just see the 10 million things that everyone's documenting at all times. All these things that are going on. And so we almost become concerned with them just by default. Every time I take out my phone, I'm seeing things that don't concern me, but hey, what can I do? Right? And so we have to just be aware of it. We're not going to completely mitigate it, but just be aware of where you're putting your focus. Again, it's that feed. What are you allowing into your feed? But it's not just what you consume, but also what are you sharing with other people? What are you putting out for others to see? And this is something where you start to notice a difference in like age groups. The way that someone who's in high school versus someone who's in college versus a young professional, they all document and display things differently. You'll see here, everyone's documenting whatever it is that's happening. You see the old lady, if I can get this, the old lady just sitting and watching, right? Just enjoying it. And the middle-aged guy wants to take a picture but can't figure out how. But we have this culture of documenting everything that we've done. You know, I remember going to like Disney World, and what would happen when we were kids is like you would go and you would stop at a landmark, and like my dad would take out the camera, take a photograph, and then we'd go on our way. Maybe somewhere else, take another picture, go on our way. And after like a 4-day trip or a 5-day trip, we would go home, you would take the reel, the film, drop it off at Walgreens or Eckerd's, which is now CVS for those of you who don't remember, right? And after a couple of days, you would go pick up your photographs in an envelope, put them in an album, and now you're done. And that was the documentation of your trip. Now you go out somewhere and you got parents with like a GoPro and a selfie stick recording like 28 hours of footage. And it's almost as if, and this is, you know, kind of true, is that we're more concerned with documenting what happened than actually enjoying the moment. And so it's almost like we're going to tell our kids when they turn like 20, you had a good childhood, I can prove it, here's 28 hours of footage from one of our trips. Right? Like, we don't think about experiencing the moment, we think about capturing the moment. And when we do that, we start to lose some of that quality time. But as we document, as we post these things, as we share these things, and again, people have always documented them, we've always had photo albums, but the way that we do it now is different. And so there's again consequences. The Prophet ﷺ told us, do not envy one another. Don't be jealous of one another. Again, very simple. We understand that. But what happens is that you go home, you had a tough day, and you sit down and you're like, man, class was really hard. Work is really difficult. My manager's writing me. The bills are piling up. I'm having trouble making ends meet. I'm not sure if I'm going to get pay the rent properly this month. My last check bounced. And you come home and you're like, how is this guy vacationing in exotic places? Right? And it's like everyone else's life looks easy and mine looks difficult. I'm going through something difficult. I come home and I look on LinkedIn. It's like, how did that idiot get promoted? I'm smarter than him. I work harder than him. Everyone else is moving up. I'm getting left behind. Someone's having trouble getting married. So difficult. Come home, open up Facebook, open up Instagram. This person got married. They see these photos with their toes pointing toward the sunset on the beach with a heart in the sand. It's like, man, my life is so difficult. Everyone else's life is so easy. And intellectually, we know that's not really the case. We know that everyone goes through difficulty, but when you bombard yourself with that imagery, it becomes difficult to grapple with. And it really starts to feel like everyone else has got it figured out. Everyone else is, living their hashtag best life, right? And all these things, and I'm over here struggling. I'm over here and things are difficult. But that's because people share only the highlights of their lives. We never know what's going on behind the scenes and what someone's really dealing with. Another thing that the Prophet ﷺ shared with us, he said that the most evil of people is a two-faced person. One who shows one face to one group and another face to another. And we find that social media, again, because it's the magnifying lens, this behavior has always existed. This behavior has always existed. But social media enables it in a very, it multiplies it exponentially. Because we're now able to fake a certain persona. We're able to fake a certain image in order to get that attention, in order to get those likes, in order to, essentially to win those internet points, so to speak. And it manifests itself in different ways. And so you see here, people are always going to post certain things, but it might not be reflective of their actual life. And so that filter becomes necessary. Because it's very easy to go down that hole of beating yourself up because you think that I'm the only one struggling. I'm the only one doing this. But so much of what we see is fake, and we have, even though we might not know it, it's hard to really realize that in the moment. When I see people who are making themselves out to be more religious than they are, more smart than they are. The funny thing is, like with activism, what's really interesting that they found, and almost anyone that has a website can almost attest to this, people share articles without reading them. And so they'll share articles for social causes, or political causes, or whatever. And they'll share these articles to look, oh, I'm woke, I'm informed, I know what's going on. And they haven't read it. Because most people, listen carefully, they care more about being known as someone who cares about these types of things than they actually do care about that thing. I'd rather be seen as someone who is concerned with XYZ country and its people and its plight. I want people to think that I'm concerned about it more than I actually do care about it. More than I've actually put some action behind that concern. Beyond sharing articles that I haven't read. But the internet enables that behavior. It enables us to put on that persona. The Prophet ﷺ also told us, whoever believes in Allah on the last day should speak good or remain silent. And this is kind of the crux of how do you fix the problem? That's how you fix the problem. But the challenge is that it's hard. It's hard. Because one of the challenges with the internet or with social media or with technology is the idea of speed. See, speed is rewarded. Speed is rewarded. The first one to get something up gets rewarded. The first one to make the comment, the first one to do this, that there's some tangible benefit to it. And so when there's an emphasis on speed, it becomes harder to slow down and to think. It becomes harder to slow down and assess, like, why am I actually even posting this? What's the purpose behind what I'm doing? And so we learn from the Prophet ﷺ, again, these basic teachings. But if we see and we connect those dots, they give us a very profound method of interacting with technology, of interacting with social media. Now someone might say, like, okay, brother, we've sat here for 45 minutes or whatever, and all you've done is trash technology and social media. You're some kind of hermit. You're over here with like an Apple Watch and a MacBook and a smartphone, and you're over here telling us that the internet is bad, and you work as a technology consultant. Like, it doesn't make sense. What's going on here, right? Let me ask everyone a couple of questions, okay? Raise your hand if you have a smartphone. Raise your hand if you have 2 smartphones. I'm the only one? All right. Raise your hand if you have a laptop, tablet.